Welcome to Sounds Like Portraits. I'm Philippe Punga. This is a conversation with creative humans. Please visit soundslikeportraits.com, and if you like this show, don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher or Google Podcast. And remember to leave us your comment and rating. It really helps new listeners find us. Thank you. This week I meet Aïda Moudachirou-Rébois. About a year ago, MAC Cosmetics announced Aïda's appointment as Senior Vice President and Global Chief Marketing Officer. Aïda started to work in the beauty industry about 20 years ago. Back then, it was all about TV, print advertising and negotiating with retailers. Today, it's a very different story with e-commerce, social commerce, influencers, as well as social responsibility and inclusiveness. Coming from Benin, Africa, Aïda has experienced a lot of changes in her personal and professional life. When she started working for MAC Cosmetics, her boss said to her, "For a couple of months, your only job is to sit back and listen. Don't feel compelled to do anything." And that helped her to deeply understand her new environment, and that was priceless for her creativity. How to deal with change? That's the question of the week. Listen to Aïda's answer, but before, she told me what she tried to do all her life.
All my life, I always try to do something that makes me happy. I was born and raised in Benin, Africa. Benin is a super tiny country on the west coast of Africa. I grew up with a huge family, like a typical African family, which are actually communities. My mom had 35 brothers and sisters. My dad family was a bit smaller, but like on my mom's side, it was the most traditional African, let's say Yoruba. We're Yoruba. It was the most traditional Yoruba family, and it was our mother tongue language. But like, what a happy, safe place to be. Like when you are surrounded by family and people actually have, at least that's how they express it, your best interest in mind, and nothing can happen to you. Like I felt, when I look back at growing up, I felt safe, super safe, super happy. I never doubt that, if something happened to my parents or if something was happening to any member of the family, that there is always somebody there. So I also grew up with what I would call like an open door policy. So in Africa, like there's doors in the houses, but they're never closed. Like anybody can come in at any time. So you have your family, and then you have like all the friends who are called extended family. Like I call all my parents friends. Like when I remember my childhood, I also remember people coming in and out of the house all the time. But my parents brought us, I think, what they, on top of this sense of community, this sense of belonging, a strong sense of being care about other people and really deeply care. So we were middle class in Benin, but Africa is quite very wide in terms of spectrum of social policies and economics. And my parents were probably more privileged than most people, but we would go and give back every Friday to orphans or just people like in the streets. My mom will cook and will distribute meals. So it was always about caring and making sure that you are sharing your blessings. So, overall, I think great sense of communities, great values from my parents, and this great sense of safety as well when you're part of a community. So really, I think I got every sense of it, and I understood every reason why this is important. And I think, when I, fast forward to today's world, where sometimes the sense of society, the sense of community is really jeopardized, it's something that actually triggers me in me like a lot of emotion, because it's part of who I am.
I guess all that helped you to deal with change in your life because you moved to France, you lived in different countries. What helps you deal with change in your life?
So we grew up in a very politically stable country. However, we had our up and down, and growing up was very funny because what my kids have been through in the past 2 years in New York, I've went through in my entire, like in my, elementary school. So you will have teachers going on strikes and then we'll go out of school for a month at a time. At the time you didn't have any remote options. So basically we'll go out, play, and my parents will try to kind of, especially my mom, will try to kind of make up for what we're not learning in school by, sitting with us and making sure that we're still learning and everything. So when I was about to graduate from middle school, my parents were like, okay, enough. You need a steady, kind of school curriculum, and we would love for you to have the opportunity. So for me, the way they actually did it, and it's not like the way, it's actually the why they did it. For them, it was the biggest gift they can give us in life: education, the gift of education. My grandparents on my mom's side couldn't read and write. So my mom is a pediatrician. So in our family, education is super key to really help you through life. And we believe in school and in education. So when my parents were saying that, the school in Benin was like up and down, they were like, okay, we'll leave you nothing as an heritage, but a great education. So we'll put the means we have in sending you abroad, and they send me to a boarding school in France. Of course, when you know the reason why they do it, and when you know how much it was costing them, in terms of it was an investment for them, I couldn't complain. From the beginning, I knew why I was there. So I was pretty focused on why they sent me there. And when you add the sense of community and the values they instill in me as a child, I actually landed in a boarding school with people that I had nothing in common with, to start with, except for maybe speaking remotely the same language because I was speaking French, but very different French and everything. But luckily, I was so optimistic that I was probably completely naive, and which really, really helped me. I was not trying to second guess anything. I just landed, tried to adapt, and trying to really fit in and do my best at school, which was the reason why I was there. I made a lot of friends along the way, and that's really helped me too. I rebuilt my community because I was in a boarding school and, a community of girls that I still see today. And it really helped me. And I think the reason why I'm not afraid of change is because my parents never, like this sense of community actually build individuals that are able to take on anything, in my opinion. You don't doubt humanity. And when you don't doubt humanity, you actually are able to, fit in and settle in peacefully anywhere. The other thing is we speak so many different languages, right? Like, so even when you are in Benin, there's languages that I couldn't understand. I was speaking 4 or 5 different languages growing up, but still when I would go to other part of Benin, there's languages that I couldn't understand. And when you layer the fact that you always have to be a learner and like observer because you don't speak, so you have to understand, you have to use empathy, probably I would say it this way, to understand what all the people are trying to tell you. I think that really helped me through. Again, going back to my roots, going back to growing as a multicultural child probably really was helpful.
So I understand that trust is key in your life. And from that, what led you to the beauty industry, to what is your current job right now?
That's a very funny story. So when I was about to graduate from high school in France, I think it was even like passing the what we call the baccalaureate exam. And I was walking in the streets, like in between, exams, and I got sampled by Fructis Garnier, which was launching at the time. And it was a green packet. And they're like, oh, it's a shampoo, but it didn't look like anything like a shampoo. It was green. I opened it. It smelled like super fruity, which was very different from any shampoo I knew. And like even the texture was different. Like it was actually, I found out after, it was a new technology that was silicone based. It was a breakthrough in the industry. And I saw it and I was like, wow, that is actually fun. I didn't know that you could actually completely like turn what a consumer know upside down, right? Like, so that was probably like my first it's interesting, right? And then I went on, after I graduated, I went to undergrad and then I did a business school as a graduate program. And it was great because you got to have, I graduated from ESSEC, which is one of the top business school in France. And in your curriculum, you ask to kind of go and, of course, have like internship to be able to get a sense of what's going on from a corporate standpoint and also understand the different kind of jobs that exist out there. But also at school, you will get a lot of business cases from, different firms or whatever that will come and like, give you a lecture or something like that. So I was able to get more exposure to what I would discover after was called marketing, which I had no idea it was, when I first encountered these fructis packets. And then alongside, so I had an internship at L'Oreal when I was in my gap year, and it went extremely well. And then, when I graduated, L'Oreal reached out to me and I was hired. That was my first job. I actually started as a consultant and a Kearney, but very quickly, like I switched back to L'Oreal. And it was the beginning of a love story because I didn't know. First of all, I didn't know that I would stay in this industry for so long. I thought I would get probably tired of it at one point, but I get into an industry 20 years ago or about it that is that looks extremely different than what it is today. Because at the time, it was so monodimensional, right? Like you had your product and you set up a price and you go to one or two retailers, right? Like you were really clustered in a class of trade. You go to Carrefour and Super U and like negotiate, how you will go to market with them. And then you shoot a big TV advertising and a print advertising. And that was about it. Think about today. You can go to any class of trade, like you can mix and match between mass and prestige and specialty multi-channel and of course e-commerce and social commerce. Now you have many more touch points for the consumer. We start with search online, but also influencer and a lot of things. So I started with one industry, and actually that industry got completely turned upside down. I also had the chance to work in so many different categories, different markets, different brands. I work in fragrances, I work in hair care, I work in skincare, I work in hair color, I work in cosmetics. So I was able to really never get bored. I work in different markets. So I held different roles, global roles, regional roles, local roles. And, 20 years after, I'm still learning from that industry because every day is different and brings a different opportunity for the consumer.
So that's a long journey in the beauty. Tell me, when you first joined MAC Cosmetics as Global Chief Marketing Officer, what was the first thing you did to understand what your new job was?
My my journey with MAC Cosmetics started probably 25 years ago when I was a consumer. It was the only cosmetics brand that I was able to use because as a woman of color, at the time living in France, there was not a lot of options for me. I remember when I was prepping for my wedding at the time, like basically like, now today you bring a makeup artist and you bring a lot of people. Like at the time you're just going like, what do I want to look like? And somebody helped me like achieve a kind of look. So I went to a few counters in Paris and I went to a lot of different brands and they're like looking at me like, no, like you're in the wrong place. Like we have nothing for you. And so I went from counter to counter and I felt like a dismay that I never felt in my life. Like I felt rejected, right? Like so, and I went to another counter and somebody at that counter, which was not a Mac counter, told me, you know what, you should go to the Mac counter. And I went to the Mac counter. I got set by a makeup artist. I got the best listening session of somebody that was like, what do you need? Da, 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 da. We have this. And then like I walk away with a bag of product to do my makeup on my wedding days. And I never look back in terms of products. As a marketer, obviously, working for a competitive company, MAC is the number one prestige brand in makeup brand in the world. So it's always been on my radar as a top competitor. So I was always, as a marketer, watching MAC unfold and, go to market and doing things. And MAC was since inception like a very different animal, right? Like based on inclusivity, skin tone, based on service, and with artists, makeup artists at the counter will really help you create your looks and give you the best service you can ask for when you know nothing about makeup. Like it's the place to go. And in addition to that, giving back, right? Like on values like Viva Glam, where you buy a lipstick, and we've been supported AIDS and HIV for 27 years now, raising $500 million, to support the cause. So it was something as a marketer I was paying attention to, and I was very impressed by. So when I started at Mac, and I started almost a year ago, I was lucky enough to have the best learning environment. My boss told me, for the next 2 months, your only job is to sit back and listen. Don't feel compelled to do anything. I've been without somebody in your position for a few months. Yes, it will be easy for me to ask you to jump in right away because I need you. However, I want you to take the time to understand the environment you're working into.
That's priceless.
That's priceless. It's the best gift, the best gift. And myself today, when I have somebody new coming on the team, I am very clear on the fact that I want them to take the time to listen. What this did to me, it did a couple of things. First of all, I was able to be an insider, but an outsider for a couple of months, which was extremely interesting because I was able to just like understand the dynamic of the teams, being able to understand the opportunities from like just observing how people were working together and seeing, where the gaps were, et cetera, et cetera. Also where the strengths were of the team, getting to know people without having to, start interacting with them. So that's the first thing. The second thing he did it, I actually took also the time to meet as many people as I could because I was not strapped into any meeting. So I was, of course, invited to meetings, and some of the meetings I was told it was great if you could be there, but most of the meeting were optional for me. So my priority was to build those relationships that will help me being successful in my role internally. So I took that gift at heart. I think at the beginning I was like, oh my God, right? Like, because usually when you get to a job, somebody asks you for your first 100 days, of impact, what you want to do. So like that was not the mandate there. The mandate was listen, understand, observe, try to see where you can add value. And this is what I did.
I come back to your first contact with Mac about this feeling of being listened to. Could you describe what being listened to is for you?
I was coming from a place where I was extremely disappointed, and probably not, my expectations were extremely low. But when I got sat on that chair, the makeup artist didn't try to really apologize for the other, whatever. It just tried to understand. So tell me more about you. Tell me what you didn't find at the other counters. Tell me what I can do for you. And then he asked me more questions about my weddings, and he found out that, it was a bicultural wedding. My husband is French and I'm Beninese, and we were having like, you know, different families, like we're having different weddings, different traditions. So he was able to understand, like I will have like a lot of like wardrobe change, tradition, like African tradition, and like, like which color are forbidden, etc., etc. So it was a good session that actually, like it was extremely relaxing for me to be listened to and to felt like I was being listened to. And I felt seen. I should have started with this. Like I felt like I was being seen for who I was, right? The entire who I was telling my story. It was asking more questions to understand exactly the kind of wedding. It was not a conventional wedding. So it was not an obstacle that my skin was not white and he had product for me. So that was also, I felt included. I think every human needs to learn, about like the power of listening, and the power of listening, not for you, but like when you listen to somebody, the power of that to that person is priceless. Instantly, you build trust, you build relationship, you build something. It doesn't mean that you always have to agree on everything if it's a dialogue or discussion, but the fact of the mere acknowledgement of having a human being in front of you that have his own life coming from his own day, or year, or whatever it is, I think it's extremely powerful.
what kind of working climate provides the best creativity in a big organization like Mike for you?
Wow, I think creativity is at every level. For me, like I see creativity in everything. Could be like in the problem solving, or it could be like in creating a campaign and coming with a breakthrough idea. It has a spectrum. So the one thing that I really, really try to tell my team is being creative doesn't mean one thing. It's a lot of different things. And everybody and anybody can be creative. I have young children and I can see how creativity is helping them grow, like whatever they do at school is always based on play and play is based on creativity, right? Like, so it's also extremely interesting to see how you can shape somebody's confidence and personality and self-esteem through letting them unfold and find their own solution and trusting them to find their solution. So I think for me, trusting that everybody can be creative in their own way is extremely important. Sometimes we tend to think that creativity means one thing. It means like creating from scratch something, right? Like, which is part of what we do. So we do a lot of things from scratch, but also through that, we work with a lot of people that are not necessarily part of the creative process as people would define it, but from whom we need to see creative problem solving, going a little bit out of the box, etc., etc. So it probably means that you need to have teams that are empowered to do or to take on something and to make it their own. So I would say empowerment is a big thing for me as a manager, as a people leader. I think empowered team can be unstoppable. Now, the one other thing that I would like to add is having that outside in view that I was talking about also, like when I was observing, but like bringing that outside in view every day. So basically, open your chakras. I would say, go out for a walk in a store that doesn't really even like play in your field. You may learn something by looking at the way people are shopping or doing things, or even looking at other product, competitive product. Even like you can look at a box of pasta and come up with an idea of makeup, right? Like it's like you have to open your chakra and keep them open and like consistently having that outside, in view. I also really recommend, my personal thing is I used to flip through magazine and tear pages of things that I found interesting that sparked some kind of emotion in me, right? Like I do the same thing now with social media. Like I pin a lot of things because I am a visual person and I'm able to really understand, when things sparks emotion and why they do it. So I bring that also to the team. So being served with a lot of like external benchmark, I think it's super hard to be creative if you are in your own bubble. So yeah, so I think empowerment, being super open, creativity is a lot of things, but in our field, we try to be creative for our consumer. So everything needs to go back to the consumer, like to be consumer centric and to be more, like rooted into a consumer insight. So it's also part of like speaking to people, understanding what's going on from other countries, etc., etc. It's like creativity is a playground. I think it's like empowering people, giving them a frame, and keeping them always appraised to what's going on outside of their field and in their life, and understanding that you can find ideas anywhere.
Personally, what inspires you the most?
I think what inspires me the most is its culture, the ability of the human being to actually always come up with something. I'm extremely inspired, like when, for instance,
Yeah, yeah.
I think it was around Christmas time, the CDC came up with new guidelines on quarantine, 5 days or something like that. Like the amount of memes that we could catch, like in 2 days after that, the CDC recommend this. It's for me, it's extremely inspiring. Like the way people use news as a currency, or like, what's going on in their life currently as a currency, to reinvent, to invent something that make other people feel something, whether it's to make you laugh or it make you think. I think that's what I call culture. you know for me, like, culture inspires me, and I think we are in a world where culture, whether it's music, art, whether it's a creator on TikTok, whether it's writing books, we have access to that, right? It has not always been the case.
Can we take an example for specific marketing inspiration? Can we take some more specific?
Some more specific without unveiling too many things.
Yes.
um
For example, which brands do you look to for, yes, your marketing inspiration?
I look at a lot of brands. Like, I follow a lot of brands, on social media, and I follow a lot of curators as well, like IPBs, etc., etc. Will actually give you also a pulse of what's going on in culture right now. Recently, probably, I would say in the past 15 years, the brand that inspired me most is Nike. Why it inspires me, it's because they are rooted in bravery in everything they do, and very obsessed with being an empowering tool for the consumer, and not just being this unattainable ruler that you cannot follow. So probably that's the brand that inspires me most.
There's another brand I'm thinking right now. It's Xbox. Tell me about your recent partnership with video game Xbox. Why is MAC Cosmetics interesting in gaming? Is it becoming a game company?
No, I think Mac it's a culture, it's a subculture. It's all about the power of community. And today, when you think about where community live, online and gaming is a huge part of, especially the younger consumer, what we call the Gen Z consumer. I think when you ask them to rate their favorite entertainment outlet, I think for the Gen Z consumer, gaming is 26%. It's really a generational thing, and it's where they spend time in community. For us, like a brand like Mac, gaming is definitely a field that is resonating with us. And we know that some of the consumer also, when they are in the game, they love to create looks for the characters in the game, right? They love to transform and to kind of like self-express themselves through their characters. And, they pick clothes and looks and all this stuff. And when you think about how they step out of the game, sometimes they recreate those looks for themselves in real life. So this is where Mac actually, their intersection of beauty and gaming is it's perfect for us. And working with Xbox, for instance, we were able to recreate characters that are very popular in some of the games. And we did that for Halloween and for the 20 years of the Xbox game. It was a way for us to help the consumer get ready for Halloween, right? Like, and they could decide to be the character that they are in the games.
This is a question about the use of beauty products. Beauty is also about fashion. Does beauty fashion allow people to express themselves, or does it force them to conform? How do you see that?
No, I think Mac, we are all race, all ages, all genders, and we always been there. We've been the first brand to embrace the LGBTQ plus community at the time where it was not something so mainstream. I told you through my story, always had like, shades for all skin tones. Mac always being about self-expression and empowering people to be what they want to be and not who we want them to be. We have a range of other 4,000 SKUs to allow you to do like what you want to be. Like,
But
we're not telling you that you have to wear rare lipstick, etc., etc. Our artists are there to guide you to reach what you want to do. So if always about like your choice freely. I think the world is changing, and now what's going on in the mainstream is finally meeting what we always wear. So beauty is about, and especially the power of makeup, it's about self-expression. It's about being who you are. And that is the power of makeup. Giving people a hint of what they can be outside of what they see in the mainstream is super important. And we always, being supported people that are what we call the underrepresented.
How is it compatible to have this notion of global consumer and diversity?
It's interesting because I think we're a global brand. We're in over 120 countries, and they range from South Africa to India, China, the US, Thailand, Singapore, Japan, Canada, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico. So our consumer is really diverse. We're very strong in emerging market as well, like India. I think what is not different is the question of inclusion everywhere. That's probably what I would say it's the more important thing today, to make everybody feel included, right? Like, so even when you go to India, there's different ethnicities, different skin tones, right? Like, so the way we work, for instance, on foundation, some of our makeup artists in India have helped create foundation that work for the Indian skin tone and undertone. And we have tested this foundation in the Indian market, and then we brought it everywhere after, right? Because some people that have those undertone that are common in India, and some of them have those same undertone in Latin America. And you have Indian communities in the UK, you have Indian communities in the US, etc., etc. So there is one consumer that is also present like in different community, but I feel like making everybody feel included. And then, you have probably Northeast Asia country where diversity and inclusion is really more about the gender. So how do you make sure that women are getting to a place where they feel like they're fairly treated, et cetera, et cetera. So our teams are locally empowered to embrace through Viva Glam the cause that matter the most to their country.
We all know that we have to live in two different worlds, the virtual world and the physical world. What kind of buying experience does Mac want to offer to the customers in the future?
Yeah, so the future of retail, I would say it's now, right? Like it's been accelerated with the pandemic when all the stores were closed. So we are a digital first brand. So for us, pivoting to e-commerce was not a big deal. There are things that we had to accelerate, but we were already very strong in e-commerce. What we accelerated were tools to enable trial, like the virtual try on. So it's really like a tool where you can try any shades of eyeshadow or foundation or lip to be able to ease up your purchase. We've also worked with what we call our omni service. So basically making the omni channel experience, whether you're in store or you online, or you decide to come to the store, you decide to buy online, etc., making that like super meaning, like seamless for the consumer.
So that's the end of the interview. I'm gonna leave the room for 1 minute. I want you to have the last word. So add whatever you want to the interview.
A huge thank you, Philippe, for taking the time to listen to me. And also, really, I could see through your questions a lot of work behind, the preparation for this interview. So I'm extremely grateful that you took the time to do that. And I really had a very, very great hour with you, and I hope you did too. And what a great way to start the day. I think I'm energized for the rest of the week. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Aïda, for sharing your story. It was Sounds Like Portraits, a podcast by Philippe Ungar. Music Charmeuse de Serpent, composed and conducted by Olivier Glisson. See you soon for the next episode.